If you want to work until you keel over, have less of everything in retirement, or give back more of your hard-earned money to the stock market again, then just ignore me. But if you'd like to protect the money you save, receive a steady, predictable retirement income, and enjoy financial security for as long as you live, then listen to this. You can download a free report that reveals the wealth-building secrets Wall Street and the banks don't want you to know. You'll learn how you can get guaranteed growth, safety, and real prosperity without risking your money in the Wall Street casino, and how to get the money you need when you need it, simply by asking for it. This is the best way to have a 100% secure retirement, and know your money will last as long as you do. To learn more about this method, and to get your free report, go to 29security.com. That's the number 29security.com. 29security.com. Go to 29security.com.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to the line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark. The leader in talk radio on the internet, right here on K98Talk.com.
My name is Jessie. I'm a United States Special Forces widow. This gives me a unique perspective on the world around us. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you how I see it, and I won't pull any punches. This is my POV, which stands for Point of View. All right, thank you all for listening. I'm happy to be back here with you. This is Jessie from Jessie's POV. It is Saturday Slowdown, although this may air on a Sunday. Shh, I'm trying to hijack part of Sunday too. Don't tell the boss. Actually, he already knows, but that's okay. We'll pretend it's a secret. I haven't told him if I'm doing it yet or not. But I'm not alone, as I'm often not alone on these longer segments on the weekends. I have Thomas Keister here with me. He is a Libertarian. Yes, you heard that right. He is a Libertarian, and he is running for the House of Representatives in Indiana. How you doing there today, Thomas? And please, do me a favor. What is a Libertarian? Is that a liberal?
Not by any stretch of the imagination. First, thanks for having me on.
You are more than welcome.
Libertarians are that odd breed of politician. We want to take over the government and then leave you the hell alone. We fit into what's basically the middle of the two-party system. You have the Democrats, which are socially liberal, fiscally liberal. You have the Republicans, who are socially and fiscally conservative. And then there in the middle, you have the Libertarian Party. We're socially liberal and fiscally conservative. And the way we approach that is, basically, we would love nothing more than for our representative government to represent us as a government the way the Constitution tells them to run government.
That would be a refreshing change. It really would be, because as I mentioned on a show about a week or so ago, our senators, United States senators, and our United States House of Representatives, and our military all raise their right hand and take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. One out of the three groups is held to that oath. The other two, not so much, at least in my opinion.
It's been, I would say the last 6 years have been probably the most baffling period in American political history. When I first became politically interested, if not active, was when I was in high school in the 90s, not to date myself too much. But I remembered, when I look back at it now, I'm kind of like, well, even if the president and the houses of Congress didn't quite see eye to eye, at least at some level, there was actually governance happening. Now all it is standoffs, stalemates, territorial pissing contests, and when we're not trying to get our heads wrapped around all of that, we have to deal with federal overreach.
Oh, you mean things like trying to tell people what bathroom they can use and trying to force us to buy health care?
Absolutely. The whole bathroom thing it's been a source of confusion and a source of amusement for me. At one point, I almost wanted to launch a protest and go to the county courthouse, and I wanted to pee on the grass in front of the courthouse. And when I inevitably got arrested for it, I was going to use as my defense, but I was identifying as a dog that day.
I was just going to ask, do you identify as a dog or a cat?
Mm-hmm. Look, there's no beaches near the courthouse, so the cat analogy probably wouldn't work as well. There's nothing to bury it with.
Oh, my cats will use the pine chips you put down in your flower beds.
I mean, this bathroom thing is a perfect example of the federal overreach that the Libertarian Party would love to put an end to. The president arrogantly handed down an edict from high yesterday afternoon, telling every public school in this country, let them use whatever bathroom they want, regardless of what it says on the door. And there was inevitable pushback from that. The most prominent one, of course, has been Dan Patrick, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas. And I gotta say, I admire his guts. Yeah, I will say I not very often you find me agreeing with Texas Republicans on much of anything, other than speeding up the process on death row in Texas. I'm all for that. But I think that the Lieutenant Governor made some very important points with his opposition to this. By issuing this edict, President Obama has imposed his will over even the Department of Education, which is a nonsensical federal law or agency that we have needed to do away with for decades now. But to issue this edict and then hold the states hostage to that edict with their federal school funding, that's extortion or blackmail. I mean, take your pick. One is as bad as the other.
Okay.
But
correct me if I'm not wrong. A, the majority of school funding goes to the lunch program so that the poorest among us can get free and reduced price breakfasts and lunches. And two, I got to say I agree with you on the Texas, speeding up the process of death penalty in Texas. I would love to see a president with the guts to do so with the people on military death row, because the president is the only one that can sign those execution orders. And I'm sorry, we haven't had a president. There has not been an execution under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, commonly referred to as the UCMJ, since 1962. I did my research on it.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's another story that made the news here in the last couple of days that I think is kind of comparable. The black female cadets at West Point doing the raised fist salute while in uniform at West Point. I seem to remember, especially when I was in the military back in the mid-'90s, and that was a difficult period of my life, because Bill Clinton was my commander-in-chief, Dick Cheney was my Secretary of Defense, and Donald Rumsfeld was my Secretary of the Army. So I had a perfect storm of just kind of ignorance over top of me. But even despite all of that, I knew, as well as everybody else that puts on the uniform, that you do not make political statements in uniform.
Amen. And that's something we need to remind our troops about. Everything from the hands up, don't shoot stuff to this recent thing with the black female West Point cadets to any number of other issues. I'm sorry.
Because I don't feel that they did those cadets any kind of favor by smacking them on the wrist for that, because yeah, it's fine. It's funny. It can go viral when you do pictures like that. But now go put on the regular duty uniform. Then go make one of those silly pictures. Then see how much of a smack on the wrist you get. Because it ain't college anymore. You're in the real world. And would you care to say Article 32 court-martial?
At a minimum, an Article 15, which is still under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and you can still lose rank, pay, and privileges for it.
And kind of tying that back around to the whole bathroom thing, and it's this agenda that is being forced in such little corners of our country like that. Because we have a president whose wife led the charge to reform the school lunches.
Oh, you mean to make the meals refused by everyone, almost like the MREs, except they're supposedly healthier but less tasty than an MRE? And don't give kids enough calories?
That takes some work. But, yeah, I mean, because you're trying to withhold the same lunches that your wife went to bat to, quote-unquote, improve. But now, if somebody who wants to identify as a woman on a Thursday, but then a guy on Friday wants to use whatever bathroom he wants, that's great, but we're going to keep your kids from eating unless that's how it works? It's a perfect example of the overreach that we see on almost daily basis in this country.
I gotta say something here. And I'm too young to remember this firsthand, but I'm an avid reader and I do a lot of research for some of my podcasts. Ronald Reagan may not have been a perfect president, but at least when he was president, there was no such thing as timeout cards for people in basic training. There was no such thing as safe space, and everybody knew what restroom to use. And Russia feared us.
Yeah, I mean, I seem to remember a time when a safe space was at home letting the military put themselves at risk. If you want a safe space, stay at home.
Exactly. Don't ask some public entity to change for you.
Because I'll even go not as far back as Reagan, even as far back as, or just recently with George W. Bush. I can't say I agree with a great deal of what happened during the Bush administration, but at the end of the day, 2 plus 2 still equaled 4, and that's how long it took to solve that question. They want to know why.
Oh, Common Core math. Oh, yes. That'll take you around Robinson Barn and through the pasture before you get to an answer.
Exactly. They want to know why 2/3 of our high school students graduate not being career or college ready. It's because while we're taking all this time to convolute the question 2 plus 2, every other country on the planet, all the way down to Zimbabwe, who at one point had $100 trillion bills in their currency system, still, at the end of the day, understand 2 plus 2 equals 4. You don't need to draw a picture. You don't need a set of instructions. 2 plus 2 equals 4. And I do think that a lot of this is how Bernie Sanders has come into political relevance. Bernie Sanders is a complicated guy for
Oh, you mean a
socialist
Democrat, which is, no offense, a hyphenated combination, and I thought I'd heard them all, but that's a new one on me.
Yeah, and I've had to deal with this on a personal level. Both my daughters are in college. So, of course, one of them is completely hypnotized by Bernie Sanders. And I have tried to explain to her, it's like, it's not that he doesn't have points. There is a lot that he says that it is hard to disagree with. However, just the statement itself isn't enough. You have to have the ability to back those statements up. And anyone with a basic understanding of economics can understand that it's not going to work. If you want our country to look like Venezuela, by all means, elect Bernie Sanders, and then in 4 years, the rest of the country will look like half of Detroit.
I actually told someone on Twitter last night, if you want free college, join the military. It's called the GI Bill.
I've seen the meme running around, and I've actually posed the question to a few people with varying degrees of success. I'm like, okay, if free college is the answer to our nation's education woes, why aren't the professors teaching for free? The problem isn't that college costs so much to begin with. The problem is that we have allowed colleges to basically go into business for themselves. There is not really any of the, I would say, major colleges in this country. There are barely colleges. Basically, there are study halls connected to a major sports program. And that's what our major colleges in this country have been reduced to. One of my examples in this is, when I seem to remember a time when the highest paid state employee was usually the governor or a U.S. congressman or that state's senators.
Exactly.
Now anymore,
exactly.
And to give you an example, right now the highest paid state employee in Connecticut is the coach of the University of Connecticut men's basketball team.
Whoa, wait a minute. You're telling me the highest paid state employee in all of Connecticut is the head coach of the University of Connecticut's basketball team? That's outstanding. It makes me want to look at Oklahoma and see what the head coach at OU for football makes. because they seem to be making waves every year.
I mean, like right across the river, the University of Louisville. Obviously, we've got Rick Pitino as our basketball coach. Say what you will about the guy, I don't have a whole lot of positives to say about him. And I'm in that weird area. I am not a basketball fan. I'm trying for 17 years now to figure out how I wound up in Indiana not being a basketball fan, but there it is.
I'm not a basketball fan either, and to be honest, I don't watch most sports. I keep a half an eyeball on it a couple times a year because every man and woman around me seems to go nuts over a certain few sporting events, so I at least feel like I need to know the names of the teams involved. During the Super Bowl, I root for the puppies in the Puppy Bowl.
The University of Louisville is my go-to example of what happens when you allow a college sports program to dictate public policy. And that actually did happen in Louisville, Kentucky a couple of years ago.
Do tell.
When they built the new KFC Yum Center.
Now, what is the
new
KFC Young Center?
That is our fairly new riverfront arena. This was built originally the concept was put in place to help Louisville try to attract an NBA franchise, which was also ridiculous because the economic base of the city of Louisville cannot support the ticket prices that it would take to float an NBA franchise.
Well, people said Oklahoma City couldn't support one either.
True. But now, when it came down to actually breaking ground for this arena, the deal was floated to everybody in Louisville that they were going to create a tax increment financing district, or TIF district, as most people might have heard of. And what happened with this district was, in this TIF district, all of the local restaurants and nightclubs and businesses, part of their taxes were going to help float the construction of this arena. Then, once the arena was completed, open for business and starting to draw attractions and concerts and everything, basically the University of Louisville said the men's and women's basketball teams have preferential scheduling. So at that point, they completely eliminated the possibility at all of getting a professional sports franchise, because if they have to play second fiddle to the college sports teams, they're not going to go for that deal. And their only other option was to go all the way across town to the aging 50, 60-year-old Freedom Hall arena that they built the Yum Center to replace. We've seen the economics of professional sports over the last 20, 25 years. Build us a new arena or we'll move. Okay, we'll build you a new arena. 10 years later, well, we want another new arena. What the hell's wrong with that arena? It's only 10 years old.
I hear you, and I will say one thing. Unlike most politicians, you're talking and you make sense. There's a song called Sidestep.
How Libertarians do that.
From a movie, and since I've decided, since this is an internet broadcast, we can say whatever we want, the title of the movie was The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
Ah, yes.
And the politician said, now they see me, now they don't, do a little sidestep, sweep around the wide step, lead the people on. And one of the reporters turns to the other and goes, "Did you catch what he just said?" And he went, "I hear him talking, but he's not coming in." In other words, his mouth is moving and words are coming out, but there's no sense to be made out of any of it. So I've got to commend you for that. You are making sense.
I've got something along those lines to wrap up the University of Louisville thing. So then when they get this arena built, first they torpedoed any idea of a professional sports team moving in. So they have their brand new spanking arena there on downtown on the riverfront with a nice view and everything. Then the University of Louisville instituted a mandatory meal ticket program. So basically, if you're a full-time or a part-time student at the University of Louisville, you have to buy a $250 meal ticket every semester, regardless of whether you're ever going to take a bite of anything on the University of Louisville campus, you have to buy $500 worth of meal tickets per school year, which was a giant, excuse the French, fuck you to all of the local restaurants and businesses that got into this TIF district to float the construction of the arena. They said, basically, the University of Louisville said, thanks for helping us build our arena. We're taking all of our students and keeping them on campus now. So now all these local businesses are stuck still paying for this arena with all of that downtown student traffic being kept on campus, eating their food, and paying them money for it. It was the political equivalent of going to a magician's show. The magician is counting on you watching the tits fall out of his assistant's blouse instead of him pulling the pigeon out of his sleeve.
Exactly. I mean, it's one of those things of sparkly object, look over to the left, while the real problem is going on over to your right. And they just don't want you to look over here. So they throw some shiny object off to the left and say, look at this, it's bright and it's shiny. And
it's things like that that's not even so much localized, but when you take it to a national big picture, this is why our country is in such the shape it is.
To quote one of my fellow hosts, he'd say America is off the rails.
Oh, America didn't even, or whatever train is being operated at the moment, they don't even have tracks. They're just plowing it through the dirt and hoping for the best right now.
Oh, I gotta laugh at that one.
And I come from a bit of a railroad family. I know what happens when you take the train off the tracks.
Doesn't it crash?
And you look at this at a national level, this is why we're being left behind in almost every significant area internationally.
Except for talking politicians. I do think we lead the world in talking heads.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. You have a presumptive Republican nominee, such as he is, that one doesn't he have a 8th grade civics lesson understanding of the United States Constitution.
And this is a man who wants to raise his right hand and say he will support and protect the Constitution and be in charge of the military when he doesn't understand either?
Well, he went to military school, and that's close enough.
No, it's not.
I know. Of all the asinine third rail statements he has made in the last 11 months of his candidacy, that ranks way up there with me.
Two of the things that got me, because I am also in the I don't want Trump for president camp, or the never Trump, which doesn't mean I'm voting for Hillary, because that's a whole other kettle of fish. This man has said that John McCain is not a hero because he was captured. I'm sorry, John McCain had an out and didn't take it because of who his father was. He had an out and didn't take it because he didn't view it was fair. He was tortured and never put out a statement against the war in Vietnam.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if he had an out, didn't take it. The fact of the matter remains, the man was captured. The man was tortured. That's all you need to know about the situation. The only torture Donald Trump has ever been through in his life is a divorce or an audit.
Or maybe having his credit cards cut off by his father when he was younger, but I doubt that even happened either.
Because we have people like Trump who will get out and he will make these outrageous, outlandish statements about China. China's coming. We have to keep our eyes on the Chinese. Do you know why we have to keep our eyes on the Chinese? Because while we've let this country go to crap around us, China is building. That's the key that a lot of people do not understand is we need to be building. Because for everyone who has given me the classic libertarian argument of, well, if you eliminate the income tax, and if you guys take away a half of our representative government, how will we have roads? We don't have roads or bridges now.
Well, we do.
Half the bridges
We have
in this
them.
country are getting ready to crumble into the rivers.
We have them, but they're in crappy shape, okay? They exist, but they're in terrible shape. So,
And it's the fact that we waste so much time and effort and energy trying to fix the rest of the world. I saw a political public policy polling, one of the major players when it comes to policy polling. One of their most recent polls, 54% of Americans want to help other countries, but only 39% of them want to help this country first. And I would love to know at what point we got to the place where it's like, well, we have men, women, and children dying of starvation in the streets on a daily basis. We send people off to war with a crap load of promises, but then when they come back to collect on those promises, then the red tape starts.
oh, you mean like not taking care of veterans with the VA? Or, let's see, putting immigrants ahead of homeless veterans on the street because we're going to pay for their housing and give them welfare and free health care and everything else when we still have veterans on the street going, what about me, who raised their right hand and protected this country, whether they deployed, fought in a war or not, they still wrote that check for up to including their life to the United States government. And that we're going to turn our backs on them? Now, if you haven't checked out my bio, for anybody listening, I am a Special Forces widow, and I am remarried to a man who's currently serving in the United States Army. So and actually my first husband's knock knock was my second knock. The first one was actually my cousin. The second one was my husband. And now I have the courage to marry another service member and support him day in and day out and understand when he deploys. So I know the price of freedom, and freedom isn't free. And I'm sorry, if you want free college, join the military.
Exactly. Because when we see the utter breakdown of what our country is willing to do for us, but we're perfectly willing to watch our government drop pallets of wrapped cash in countries that A, don't need the money, or B, we could drop 30 million, let's pick any freaking country in Africa that we supply with foreign aid, which is code word for a pallet wrapped in cash. We drop tons of cash on these places. We've been dropping cash on Zimbabwe or Ethiopia or comparable places for 30, 40 years. And I noticed that no matter how much money we've dropped on them, they're still starving to death. They still haven't made one tiny baby step towards something resembling progress, yet we keep dropping pallets of cash on them.
Now, I will say, for all
city in Michigan that got poisoned, and that's barely a daily news item in this country.
I will say there is one country I believe in our foreign aid going to, and only one, Israel. They are, in my opinion, a true ally in the Middle East, and they are the only surviving democracy in the Middle East. So that's the one country, and you don't hear Israel every other week chanting death to America.
Exactly. Because now, that's something else that libertarians have had to argue with in the past. We insist on, if not an outright elimination of foreign aid, we at least want a massive scale back. Because we're not dispassionate people. We're not willing to watch people starve to death and sit by and idly do nothing about it. I don't have a problem with sending food or medicine to countries in need of assistance. But when you drop, $30 million on a country, basically you're just giving a warlord another week-long staycation to, look over his vassals and laugh because we're bankrolling them.
Like I said, though, I feel that Israel is a good steward of our money. However, the money we pay Pakistan, I'd easily take that back. And I don't think we should be unfreezing Iran's assets for that matter.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that nuclear deal. I mean, I have not broken that whole deal down in depth, but there was just not a lot about that really looked promising to me.
Okay, the thumbnail version of it. Okay, Iran, you can't work on developing a nuclear warhead for 10 years. However, they didn't. The U.S. won't sell you any weapons, but Russia can. And Russia promptly moved in there and said, sure. And the European countries wanted back into Iran and to trade with them and to buy their oil and do all kinds of other things. And this president's going on about snapback sanctions, and yeah, there's no such thing as snapback sanctions. UN sanctions are slow to get in place, fast to remove, and impossible to put back, from what I understand.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make, snapback provisions, you have to realize who you're dealing with. Their fingers were crossed behind their backs when they signed this deal. So you can go back 10 years, you can go back 15 years, you can go back however long you want, and their fingers were still crossed.
I'm going to recommend a book to you when you have a chance to read it, and it will give you a whole new perspective on Iran. It's actually written by a former Iranian citizen. It's called A Time to Betray. The man wrote it under a pseudonym because he feared for his own life, because he used to be a part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And he actually betrayed his country and worked for the CIA for over a decade. That's how strongly he wanted to change his country. He felt the desire to betray his country in order to try and save it, which of course he failed. But he is now a U.S. citizen living safely in this country, but he still can't reveal his true identity because Iran would still love to execute him. But he talks about he grew up in Iran before the whole 1979 Shah takeover and the mullahs came into power and all that, and he compares it to the before and after picture, and he talks about the Iranian hostage crisis and all, and how Iran's been evading their sanctions for years, and tells you exactly how they've been doing it. And so I think it's a really fascinating book from that perspective.
I will definitely have to check that out.
I think every member of government, or Congress, and certainly anybody dealing with Iran should be forced to sit down and read that book. Because if you had blinders on before, this literally just rips them away and shows you the inner workings of Iran. And that's not something most Americans ever get to see. All we get is what gets out.
Then I'll even kind of sidestep it over. I know I've criticized the presumptive Republican frontrunner. I guess it's time to move on and make fun of the presumptive Democrat nominee. Because that's one of the things that has made this election cycle so baffling to me is, one, you have an utter buffoon representing the right. And a lot of people might take issue with me on that statement, but if you want to break it down to basic levels, libertarians are actually a little bit closer ideologically to Republicans than they are Democrats because of our bear trap mentality when it comes to fiscal conservancy. Then you have people like Hillary Clinton who get in the mix, and without a doubt, she is the most disingenuous presidential frontrunner I've seen the Democrats run, maybe ever. For someone who has been, coming out and I hate to agree with Donald Trump, but she is playing the woman's card. I have a vagina. Vote for me. No.
Okay, as a woman, I've got to say, Hillary, you don't have my vote either, and I am a woman. I have the same biological parts you do. Your anatomy is not enough to make me want to vote for you. I'm sorry.
Because she wants to come out there and speak about her strong, pull for women's rights. This is a woman who wouldn't even pay her own Senate staff the same as, or her own female Senate staff. She wouldn't even pay them the same as her male staffers until the accounting was made public. And her foundation has accepted money from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. We're talking countries with great records when it comes to women's rights.
Oh, you mean countries where women can't drive, women can't vote, and God help you if you want to go to a sporting event and you're a woman, you may or may not be allowed? Yeah.
As long as your face is covered and you have a male escort, yeah, no problem.
Actually, in some countries, no, you can't. I will say this, and I am all for, if you are Muslim and choose to wear the headscarf or the burqa, I am all for it. But if you are being forced to do it by your government's policies, that's where I disagree with it. If you are doing it by choice, go right ahead, go along with it. But if you are being forced, I have a friend and she is Orthodox Jewish. Her hair is completely covered at all times when she leaves the house. And that is her choice. So, like I said, I understand head coverings being a choice, but I have a problem when it's dictated by a government and that you can be arrested and whipped or stoned or whatever. And when victims of rape are stoned to death for adultery.
Yes, because and it's funny you mentioned that, because I actually had someone call me out on Twitter last night, as a matter of fact. They had went through my website and they'd seen some of my stances and positions, maybe read a couple, 2 or 3 of my articles or something. And they said they couldn't support me in any which way I wanted to look because of my pro-choice stance. And I kind of want to, I don't like to engage in a whole lot of Twitter political arguments because, it comes down to the joke, it looks like 2 retarded kids fighting. At the end, there might still be a winner, but you're both still retarded. And it just struck me, it's like, you can't support me because I'm pro-choice. Because I'm a guy, in a full sense of disclosure, I'm on my 3rd marriage. I have as much right telling someone what to do with their body. I mean, seriously. I've said for years, if men could get abortion, not only would abortion be legal, but you could get it at a drive-thru with an order of fries.
Oh, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one in ages. I'm also pro-choice, just to be open and honest. And the reason I'm pro-choice is not because I don't believe in the sanctity of life. It's because I don't want anyone, government or otherwise, making that decision. That decision should be between the woman and her doctor. Now, I personally would like to see partial birth abortion ended. If the fetus is viable outside the mother's womb, deliver it.
Yes, I will have to agree with you on that, because to me it's not so much a matter of, is it proper? Is it right? No, it's a matter of, it's shit or get off the pot. You know a pregnancy is 9 to 10 months long. You had 9 to 10 months to figure this out.
I will say I do know one friend... You can't
wait till the horse is crossing the finish line to place your bets. That's not how it works in the real world.
I do know one friend who had a very serious medical issue at 36 weeks into their pregnancy. And they were faced with the idea of having an emergency cesarean or terminating the pregnancy at 36 weeks. And they talked to the doctors, and the doctors were like, yeah, the baby's completely viable. They'll have to be in neonatal intensive care for a while. But it's not a problem. They're 2 weeks, essentially, because full term is considered 38 weeks, they're essentially 2 weeks premature. And the lungs may not be fully developed, but we can work on that. We've got about 3 or 4 days leeway. We can put you in the hospital and give you these meds to help give that baby just a couple of days more to try and develop. So I do know where sometimes it's not, oh my gosh, but for the, in those circumstances, I can kind of see it, but I'm sorry, for any other reason than the mother's life is suddenly in jeopardy by this pregnancy, after a certain period of time, I'm sorry, if the fetus is viable, deliver it. There is always emergency C-section.
Yeah, because and this is kind of an interesting issue to me for another reason, because I was actually born 3 weeks premature.
I got you beat. I was born 2 months premature, weighing 3 pounds and 6 ounces.
So I got to do the whole ride in the incubator thing for a while and all that good stuff. But when people say, well, it shouldn't be up to the woman, like, let me explain something to you. When my mom had me and my sister, I'm actually one half of a set of twins, when she had us, she was a single parent in the military in the mid-70s. That was not something that was very common in the military atmosphere.
No, not in the 70s. I'm amazed she wasn't told to get out.
That was the rub. They said they could not throw her out, but then again, they did not have to make it easy for her either.
Well, that's where you hope you've got good family support.
Mm-hmm. So she completed her enlistment, and that was it for her and the military. But it's not. It comes down to a matter of what you do with those choices. If you're using it as birth control, then yes, I believe at some stage there has to be some kind of intervention. But then you have people that come out, well, we need more abstinence training. Yeah, I'm sorry, if you're talking about abstinence training, the first thing I think of when you say abstinence education is Bristol Palin, and that's not exactly the poster I want to put in my daughter's bedroom.
It's not someone I want a poster of in anybody's bedroom either, so trust me, I see your point. Now, Thomas, we've run a little long, and I am well past commercial break, and I have a feeling you have a lot more to say. So we're going to take a brief break here while we go pay some bills.
All righty.
And I'll bring you right back on after we get those bills paid.
Go out, consume.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to the line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030.
All right. Thank you all for hanging in there with us over that commercial break. And I know we were a little long before taking one, so I hope you were able to refill your coffee and get settled back into your chair, because Thomas Keister, who is a Libertarian running for the House of Representatives in Indiana, is still with us, and we're having a pretty interesting conversation here.
Yeah, it's been a little bit all over the place, but they've all been good places in the end.
I got to say one thing as far as Hillary goes. We were kind of discussing her before we got sidetracked on Roe v. Wade and abortion. I'm sorry, any person who has been trained by the State Department about classified information, or trained by any government agency about classified information, that does not realize certain information is born classified, and that does not deserve to be in the Oval Office. Also, to that fact, anyone who can call an FBI investigation a security review, which the director of the FBI came out and said he's never heard of that term before. Finally, he speaks up. Thank you. I'm sorry. Anybody who can try and downplay it by renaming it and hoping they can whitewash it away doesn't deserve to be in the highest office in this land.
Now, someone thought you said whitewater right there. You're probably going to get a couple of emails over that. Oh, let it go.
No, I said whitewash, not white water. Anybody who's trying to cover up the fact that they are under FBI investigation by calling it a security review does not deserve to be in the highest office in this country.
And, it's kind of the thing that, it leads a lot of people to facepalm when especially people that are just now getting into the political process in this country. The Clintons have proven, above all else, that they are the first family of semantics.
Well,
it depends what your definition of is. And
I will say one thing.
About a lady.
The Clintons have been Teflon, but I think they've been out-Tefloned by Teflon Donald Trump here.
It's amazing.
I mean, he can put down
Hillary Clinton.
He can put down a veteran, insult a handicapped New York Times reporter, and people are still going vote for him, and including veterans. I'm just going, what are you thinking?
The single most dangerous thing that Donald Trump has said this whole candidacy of his was the fact that we're not going to default on our debts because we can print more money. That is the single most dangerous thing that any candidate and there's like 500 candidates for president altogether. That is the
right. Most people haven't heard of
one of them has said.
Most people have only heard of like 2 to 5 of them, and most people are only aware of 3 that are, quote, left in the race, because mainstream media does not cover libertarians. Although I will say, Fox Business, I will give a kudo. They did do a Libertarian presidential candidate debate. Thank you, John Stossel. He actually did pull something together on Fox Business.
And that should really be the wake-up call to people in this country. When John McAfee has a strong showing in a nationally televised political debate, that should wake people up. I'm not saying John McAfee is the perfect libertarian candidate, but given the extensive amount of baggage that he brought into his candidacy, I don't know if you actually watched the debate.
I will admit I have it DVR'd. I have not found the time to watch it because unlike podcasts or audiobooks, it's not something I can stick on an iPod, throw in my van, and take down the road with me. So I have not, but I was going to try and get around to it this weekend. I do have it recorded.
If you get a chance to check this debate out, John McAfee, who everybody knows, the creator of McAfee Antivirus, had some personal issues over the last couple, 4 or 5 years before he decided to seek the Libertarian Party nomination. With all of that said and with all that put behind him, he went out on the debate stage and he put on one of the strongest performances. I would almost say it was a dead heat between him and Gary Johnson. He was on point. He didn't trip over himself. He surely didn't forget any government agencies he wanted to eliminate like Rick Perry did. He didn't mispronounce any of them like Donald Trump has in recent weeks. And it's kind of a telling statement when even someone that there's a public perception that he's not quite right, but he's still making more sense than the 17 Republican candidates they trotted out, or the 3 or 4 Democratic candidates they trotted out. When the guy who was running from a murder charge or being under suspicion of murder in Belize gets deported from Guatemala back into the United States and then gets busted for driving under the influence of Xanax in Tennessee, when he's making more sense than the mainstream candidate.
Houston, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem.
Because actually, outside of the state run, I actually have a write-in candidacy that I'm conducting for the presidency. I decided to do this in January 2015. This was purely an experiment on my part.
Okay, you got to tell me who's your write-in candidate.
Oh, it's me. I'm an actively campaigning write-in candidate for the presidency.
Cool.
Except in Indiana, because I have to keep the ballot open for the state house run. But I was just kind of curious because you actually mentioned before we went on the air that you reside in a state that doesn't allow write-in votes. And there's only like 7.
No, but if I did, I have to say my write-in candidate wouldn't be you or any other politician. It would be the one person in this world who seems to make more sense than any politician I have tripped over, and that is number 1 New York Times bestselling author Brad Thor. And he has come out publicly, and this is a man who depends on people buying his books for his income, and said that his litmus test as to who he will cast a ballot for is liberty. And that he does not feel either Hillary or Donald Trump have met that litmus test. So he is either going to go with third party or write-in. He has not yet decided, although I haven't checked to see if Tennessee has write-in. But it's one of those things of, wait a minute. And I will say this. He has actually said that in his open letter, which is on his public Facebook page, that Donald Trump is a potential despot. Now, if that isn't calling someone out.
Well, but the sad part is someone would still have to explain to Mr. Trump what a despot is.
I'll leave that to his handlers.
But yeah, the write-in candidacy that I launched, this was kind of an experiment on my end because a lot of people ask, well, why do you go into political races like this? Why do you try to run for office? I'm like, because if you want to criticize the process that you don't feel is working, you need to get knee-deep in it where you're getting the aroma just like everybody else is. And one of the things that people don't understand is this is, a constitutional republic. We're the land of the free. But you really don't know how many hurdles there are to that political freedom until you try to become a candidate yourself.
Now, I will say that because of my military affiliations, I don't get too deeply involved in the political process because I don't want to unwittingly drag either when I was married to my first husband, him or my current husband into that scene because of the blowback they could face. So what I do is I do my podcast and I open it up to any candidate. I don't care what party you're with, as long as you at least can string coherent sentences together and you're not talking about unicorns and glitter like this one guy up in Maine or Massachusetts somewhere, literally was throwing glitter bombs on people as part of his campaign. As long as you haven't gone that far off the deep end and can string coherent sentences together, I don't care what office you're running for, because my show's on the internet. Anybody who wants to can come on. And that's, like I said, that's why I took the large blocks of time on the weekends, so I can slow down and have these long conversations, because normally, if this was my weekday show, I'd be saying, I got 15 seconds until I'm out the door, but because it's my weekend Saturday, or maybe I'll do a Sunday slowdown this week, because it's my weekend slowdown time, I can let this conversation go on as long as we feel like talking. And that's my way of getting involved, because I don't feel it's safe for my husband's career for me to go out and be too politically active.
Yep. Then when you find out exactly what you're facing, because, this is, if you want to be technical, this is the presidential campaign is my sixth run for office. The previous five, it's a matter of filing the paperwork, getting everything stamped and approved and everything. But then I've heard so many people over the years go, well, just run as a write-in. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to show you exactly, it's not as easy as you think to just say, I want to be a write-in candidate. And it's not. There's like 11 states where all you have to do is say, I'm running for president. And fantastic, you're considered a write-in candidate. Then you have states like Illinois, where I was raised, where you actually have to qualify as a write-in candidate in each one of the 96 counties within the state of Illinois.
Wait a minute. You're saying you don't have to qualify once. You have to qualify 96 times for one state.
To be a write-in presidential candidate in the state of Illinois, you have to qualify as a write-in candidate in every individual county.
Okay, so what have you looked at what it takes in Illinois to be on the main ballot without being a write-in?
Basically, Democrat and Republican candidates just have to go through the party nomination process. Illinois, unfortunately, does not have ballot access or statewide ballot access for the Libertarian Party as of yet. Apparently, we just haven't gotten enough dead people to vote for us in Illinois. But, in most states, when you get past the mainstream candidate, to be a Libertarian candidate, you either have to have the existing statewide ballot access or you have to go through the signature game and try and find enough people who have even heard the Libertarian Party to sign the nomination petition so you can enter the race. And the problem with that is, and then there's other little hurdles and barriers that people, I've kind of found out a few of them here and there. I don't know if you remember a couple of years ago when Stephen Colbert was kicking around running for office in South Carolina.
I do vaguely recall that.
The reason he did not do it was, one, to get placed on the congressional ballot that he was seeking. The South Carolina Democratic Party demands $10,000. I'm like, you've already priced the vast majority of your own constituents out of the race. You've turned it into a pay-for-play system.
Yeah, that sounds like if you want on the ballot, you have to give us money. And, excuse me, but doesn't that sound like what Hillary Clinton was doing with the Clinton Foundation? You want something looked at by the State Department, you have to give a donation to the Clinton Foundation, so it can't directly be traced, but then I'll think about taking care of you?
Well, I mean, this is a woman she has a 40-year proven track record of being shady. She was thrown off the Watergate Commission for being shady. How off do you have to be too corrupt to take down Richard Nixon?
Yeah, that's pretty corrupt if you can't be trusted to take down Richard Nixon. On that note, there is a parody song out, and I've seen it. It was going semi-viral, but it's kind of petered out now. It was called Super Sneak. And I will have to send you the link to it because it is all about Hillary Clinton being shady, and it is hilarious. That, and I have another one that is First Amendment. It's called The Day Google Died. And they are both hilarious because The Day Google Died is about our First Amendment rights being attacked, which, I'm sorry, wouldn't that be what Trump is trying to do when he says he's going to strengthen libel laws so that, news articles have to be approved to be published? And
but he's really wishing he had done that before John Miller came to the forefront.
Oh, he's wishing something or other. I haven't decided what. Now, I'm wondering if the whole John Miller thing is his way of shiny bauble, look over here and stay away from the fact I haven't released my taxes.
That's kind of a weird area on that. I've talked with a lot of people that are kind of irritated that Trump has not released his tax returns. One of the things I like to say to him is, have you seen how big his tax return is? If you want to comb through a 7-foot-tall stack of paperwork, be my guest. I do tax preparation for a living, and I don't want to look at a 7-foot-tall stack of paperwork. But then,
I would like to see him at least, if he doesn't want to release the whole thing, because, yeah, it would be a 7-foot-tall stack of paperwork, I would at least like to see him release, the cover sheet, which shows how much he took in deductions, how much he paid, so we could at least get a sense of the percentage of taxes he paid and how much he donated to charity. The overall numbers. I think most people could at least comprehend that.
And that's the biggest thing to it about me is you're really not going to learn much of anything about somebody from their tax return other than their income for the year, the tax rate they had applied to them, whatever business interests they may have. Because I can only imagine what Donald Trump's Schedule C looks like. It has to be the most chum-filled Pandora's box I've ever heard of. And then charitable donations. And if you've got a problem telling somebody what charities you donate to, you're obviously not ready for prime time.
I got one for you. You know how Trump keeps saying he's going to hire the best people? His Citation X, I think it was a Citation X, his Citation jet, his small jet that he often uses to go to campaign events, was grounded by the FAA. Do you know why? One of the, quote, best people he hired failed to renew the registration. So in order to get that plane back in the air quickly, Trump sold it from one company to another. Otherwise, it would still be grounded. So if that's an example of hiring the best people, thanks, I'll pass.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to discuss hiring the best people, you really don't need to look any further than Omarosa or his little racist butler. I mean... I didn't see a butler that racist in Gone with the Wind.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's absolutely mind-boggling. And that's the uphill battle that libertarians are especially having to fight this election cycle, is the fact that we are I don't really want to call him our front runner, but he's kind of our presumptive front runner, Gary Johnson.
Okay.
When you stack the three of them up, it's still kind of mind-boggling. So you have Gary Johnson. He started a one-man handyman service while he was in college, and by the time he sold it, it employed over 1,000 people and was one of the largest construction companies in the state of New Mexico. He served 2 terms as governor of New Mexico as a Republican in a majority Democratic state. Vetoed more legislation.
I was wondering if that's the Gary Johnson you were referring to. I hadn't yet made the connection, but that was the only political Gary Johnson that came to mind, but I just wasn't sure. So do you know why he didn't run on the Republican ticket, or didn't he want to be in the Republican clown car of 17?
He he did seek the Republican nomination in 2012, and then when they decided to go with Mitt Romney for whatever the hell reason, he went over to our side, became a Libertarian, and was our nominee in 2012. The most successful Libertarian presidential candidate we've ever had. But it comes down to his legislative record. In 8 years as New Mexico governor, he vetoed 738 bills, more than the other 49 governors combined over that 8-year period.
That is a huge number of bills. Can you give me an example of just a few pieces of the legislation he vetoed?
I sure can't, not off the top of my head.
That's okay. That's okay.
You have someone that is willing to say no to legislatures, especially when they were overreaching bills. They were bills that called for spending with no explanation of where the funding was going to come from. He put the state from a deficit to a surplus doing this stuff for 8 years. So he has a proven legislative track record of taking governance seriously and treating it as the responsibility that it is. And then in comparison, you have two Fifth Avenue shell game players.
Oh, you mean Trump, who's up on fraud charges, and Hillary, who's under FBI investigation? And I'm sorry, the FBI does not conduct security reviews. Newsflash. The FBI does not conduct security reviews. They conduct investigations. It's the Federal Bureau of Investigations.
Because more than his tax return, I would like to file a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, for those of you who don't like acronyms. I would like to file a FOIA request for Donald Trump's FBI background.
Ooh, that could be interesting. That could be really interesting.
That's the document I want to see. So we're talking about a guy who...
If you file it and manage to get it, I would love to have you on to talk about it.
If I can get my hands on that, I will rent, and I'm scared to death of heights, but I will rent an airplane and litter the nation with it.
Hey, I'm not scared to death of heights. I've even jumped out of airplanes.
They had to throw me out.
No, when you are married to a Special Forces soldier, you get exposed to all kinds of things you never thought you'd get exposed to. My first husband taught me to shoot, not only with my right hand, which I am predominantly right-handed, as most Americans are, but I can shoot with my left hand just as accurately as I can shoot with my right. And yes, I am a concealed carry permit holder. And yes, when I'm not on federal property, such as a United States military base, 99.9% of the time, I am armed. So speaking of the Second Amendment, what's your stance on it?
Pro. I will say that while I don't really understand some of the arguments over we need assault rifles to go deer hunting, I still can't get my head wrapped around that, and I grew up in deer hunting country. I understand that there's a little bit of resistance on that. It's like, well, maybe people aren't comfortable with everybody having assault rifles, but then at the same time, it's not like we're in an active war zone in our country because of people having assault rifles.
I've heard other countries are afraid to invade us, not so much because of our military, which unfortunately is being reduced to its lowest level since before World War II. But because, to put it to quote one of our enemies, for lack of a better term, there's a rifle behind every blade of grass. And I'm sorry, but I am an NRA member, and I am a gun owner. And yes, we actually do own an AR-15. Now, I'll even tell you the reason behind it. My first husband, it was a Valentine's Day present to him. Although what I did to make the purchase completely legal is I gave him the money to go buy it. He got it so he could improve his marksmanship score. because it's very similar to the M16 that they shoot in the military.
And what's really funny is here's the one of the weird bits of trivia about myself. I was actually born in Germany, both parents being in the military at the time. But I grew up in a little town in Illinois. It's called Centralia. It's a 60-mile straight east shot from St. Louis, Missouri. Do you know who else is from Centralia, Illinois?
Do tell.
Jim Brady of Bradyville fame.
Really?
I grew up in Jim Brady's hometown. Of course, at the time when all this happened, I mean, I was 5 going on 6 when the assassination, or I think I was 6 when the assassination attempt on Reagan happened. And pretty much the running joke at that time was, well, great. One guy jumps in front of a bullet for Reagan, and now nobody can buy guns. And I was kind of like, well, but I mean, the whole gun issue is just, it's taken to weird extremes in certain parts of our country. People want to complain about the high incident of gun crime. Well, let's examine that. What are the two cities with the most restrictive gun laws in the nation?
I believe they're Chicago and D.C.
And Washington, D.C. And who are the 2 biggest cities for gun crime?
Chicago and D.C.?
Chicago, Illinois, and Washington, D.C.
In fact, back to my favorite author, not that I want to keep harping on him, he has multiple death threats against him and his family because of some of the books he's written. And, in fact, one of his books is banned in Saudi Arabia. So he must be doing something right in my book. But he moved from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised there, to Nashville, Tennessee, because his wife did not qualify for a concealed carry permit in Chicago because he was the subject of death threats, not her, even though they wanted to kill him and his family. Because there was no specific threat naming his wife, she was not eligible.
But now the only problem I will give that is he picked one of the worst states in the country to move to. Tennessee does not recognize the castle doctrine. You cannot even shoot someone in self-defense in your own home in the state of Tennessee.
Well, I will say it was a toss-up between Tennessee and
your
Texas.
Family's life, you will go to jail for shooting someone in self-defense in Tennessee.
It was a toss-up between Tennessee and Texas, and I heard the wife picked Tennessee, so that's how they landed there. But that's just what I picked up on listening to an interview he did.
Because one of my favorite international examples is Switzerland. Switzerland has one of the lowest crime rates on the planet, but they have mandatory gun ownership. Man, woman, child, does not freaking matter. You own a gun in Switzerland.
Well, I'm sure you don't own a gun at age 4, but when you're old enough to be responsible.
Yeah, there's mandatory gun ownership. You have to know how to fire it. You have to know how to maintain the weapon. And you have to go through like a basic gun safety course.
Now,
yet they have one of the lowest crime rates in the world, but every time they slap up a gun-free zone sign in this country, there's probably another weekend full of homicides, like every weekend in Chicago, Illinois.
I got one for you. I don't know how much you know outside your local area. Virginia has a concealed carry license that you can actually apply for being a Virginia resident or an out-of-state resident by taking the course online without any proof that you have ever handled a firearm. You want to respond to that? Which I think, I'm going to state my opinion, then I'll shut up and let you explain yours. Your reaction to that, which I can guess from the snicker. In the state I have my concealed carry permit, I was required not only to take a class, I was required to fire 50 rounds. My accuracy did not matter as long as I, could hit the broadside of a barn. And in front of my instructor, I had to fire those 50 rounds just to make sure I could safely handle a weapon. And I think people being able to get a Virginia concealed carry without proof they've ever actually fired that weapon. I also, personally, I go to the range a minimum of once a month. And when I do, I practice drawing from my concealed carry holster, I practice reloading, and I also practice my accuracy with both my right and left hand. And unlike a lot of shooters, I don't control my breathing when I shoot. I was taught not to, because you're not going to be able to control your breathing when the adrenaline is pumping and you need to pull that trigger. So I was taught...
if you try to control your breathing in a situation like that, you're going to wind up hyperventilating, and that's not going to help the situation as a whole.
So my first husband taught me how to shoot without controlling my breathing and with both hands with equal accuracy. Let's just put it this way. You don't want to be on the wrong end of my gun. So now, why don't you respond to what Virginia has done with their concealed carry permit? Well, I believe that, it's good in some respects. No proof you've ever actually handled a firearm, that rubs me the wrong way.
I would have to appropriate a Simpsons joke for that. It seems that their half-assed attempt at over-regulating isn't nearly as scary as their half-assed attempt at under-regulating the situation.
That's a good one.
Because there's actually... I'm trying to think here. I'm actually also a notary public here in Indiana, and the association I belong to, there's actually a push in motion to allow notary publics to notarize documents online, which is something that is done on a fairly regular basis. But they're wanting to extend that privilege into notarizing foreign documentation. Like, say, somebody in Pakistan hits me up on Skype and wants me to notarize something for them. That's perfectly acceptable.
Wait a minute.
That
Translation. Do you read? If you don't read the language, in my opinion, you shouldn't be notarizing it.
Exactly, and there is no way that, like, somebody like me, I live in a town called Clarksville, Indiana. Population 21,000 people. I am not an authority on what fake Pakistani identification looks like. I have enough experience with state IDs and government IDs in this country. I can tell you if something's probably fake or not. I would like to see the training involved in trying to get somebody figured out what a fake Pakistani passport looks like.
Oh, well, if you're dealing with a Syrian passport, you realize it could be a legitimate document with the wrong person's name and photo on it, because guess what? ISIS, our good old friends over there, took control of several unknown number of passports, legitimate Syrian passport blanks, and the machines to make them. So, while I have to say I don't agree with Donald Trump saying ban all Muslims, I would like to institute a ban in this country on Syrian passport holders other than those assigned to the UN, which are restricted to a 25-mile radius around the UN.
And that's kind of what, it comes down to in a nutshell for us, because, when people hear libertarian candidates and then we start giving them, what our principles and our stances are, like, well, you can't do away with all this government. And why not? I think it's ridiculous that we live in a society, in a country, where if you want to open a lemonade stand in New York City, you have to invest 9 months of your time and almost $6,000 in licenses and permits and food service training courses to sell lemonade.
Now, I will say, as a member of the Family Readiness Group, in fact, I'm a leader, the Army does require me to have a food handler's permit if we're going to sell anything that is not prepackaged. Now, I did get the United States Army to recognize the ServSafe certification, which, if you're not familiar with it, it is by the National Restaurant Association and recognized by every restaurant in this country. Full stop. I did get them to accept that because I can go online and take their course for $15 and have the certificate be valid for 4 years versus chasing down the U.S. Army, sitting in their classroom for 4 hours and having a 1-year certificate. And given that I'm a very busy woman, I thought that was a better investment in my time. So I have no problem with the food handlers part. It's all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's just I think we're starting to hit a critical mass in this country. People have finally starting to come to the realization that the main party on the left and the main party on the right are only interested in two things: the main party on the left and the main party on the right. And they're doing this at the expense of me, you, and everybody else on down the chain. For example, my opponent in my state representative race is legitimately one of the nicest human beings you will ever meet. There's not going to be any mudslinging on this campaign.
That's good to hear.
Oh, because I did a campaign 4 years ago. I threw a bit of mud, but I felt it was justified. But the candidate I'm running, or the incumbent I'm running against, he's not a bad guy, but the representation that we get in this state is not what we deserve. Indiana has what's called a part-time legislature. Our state representatives make $24,000 a year, and they also earn a $156 per diem while the assembly's in session. So
now, is that $156 every time it's in session, or $156 for the whole year?
Oh, it's $156 per day the General Assembly is in session.
Okay, so you can pay for a modest hotel room and some food.
Right. So if you break down the numbers, it works out to about $35,000 a year that our part-time state legislators are making. Now, when I say part-time legislature, that is exactly what it is, because if I am lucky enough to be elected this November, I will have a 2-year term as a state representative. That 2-year term, I am only required to be in Indianapolis 90 days.
That's not a lot.
In Indiana meets 60 days in odd-numbered years and 30 days in even-numbered years. So you're paying people around $70,000 for 90 days worth of work. That's not part-time anything. And then my incumbent opponent, the legislation that I've seen him involved with in the last 2 years is ludicrous. He was in on a bill to congratulate one of our local high school girls volleyball teams for winning a state championship.
I could see a proclamation or something for it, but a whole bill?
And then another one was wishing one guy a happy 90th birthday.
Okay, if he was 100, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, too bad Willard Scott retired, or you get a shout-out on the Today Show. But these are things that you could accomplish for free, sitting at home on a Facebook page.
Or make a YouTube video.
Yeah. I had an interview on the state race recently, and I was like, well, what would you do? I'm like, the first day of the General Assembly session, I would put a blanket bill on the floor for consideration to go ahead and congratulate every high school student in Indiana for whatever the hell they managed to accomplish. Our state legislature is not there to hand out participant ribbons and slaps on the back. They're there to run the state of Indiana. And this is why we have things like the Carrier plant deciding to up and relocate to Mexico. This is why we have things like Governor Pence with his ludicrous religious freedom restoration bill that he tried to pull off last year with no success.
That really backfired, at least financially, for the state, from what I could tell, or almost did, until he repealed it at the 11th hour, if I recall correctly.
It's like, was somebody not wanting to bake a gay wedding cake worth $28 million in state business? No. And my incumbent actually supports a ban on same-sex marriages. Regardless of how you feel about gay marriage or same-sex marriage or however you want to term it, the end result is you are electing somebody to represent you who wants to hold back a fundamental right from somebody else in your state. If they're not interested in everybody's rights, they have no right sitting in that chair trying to create legislative agenda. They take an oath to uphold constitutions, the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Indiana. Having taken that oath and then to turn around and try to deny someone a right as basic as marriage, and we don't even believe government should be involved in the whole marriage game anyway.
Well, I see your point on that, but I also think that there should be some kind of official record as to who's married to who, even if it's just something you file with the courthouse, so that, you know, Sally Smith can't walk in and say that she's married to John Doe at a hospital and make his medical decisions when Jane Doe's really his wife.
Mm-hmm.
I
have no problem with the marriage license apparatus, I guess you'd call it. But you can't, it's when they try to legislate who is allowed to get it and who isn't. You know, it's not denying felons the right to vote. It's not saying that grandma who's 90 with, you know, cataracts the size of Kennedy $50 can't drive. It's a basic human right that's recognized as such by pretty much every country on the planet, with the exception of maybe half the Middle East.
Oh yeah, in the Middle East, if you're gay, you are executed. In Iraq, they tend to like throwing you off the top of a building.
Oh yeah, and it's these little subtleties that people don't seem to get when they continue to vote in these morality agendas. It's like, oh, okay, you can successfully stop someone from marrying their partner. It's getting beyond the arrogance of, like I said, politicians, most of whom are probably like me, or are on their third marriage. I don't have any business telling anybody who they can and can't marry. I couldn't get it right the first two times. Luckily, I've managed to get it right this time. But why shouldn't everybody in this country be afforded the same opportunity to put all of their crap on a table and flip a coin to see whether or not they end up getting the keep half of it?
Hey, I actually support the right of gay marriage, and I have to say I'm also glad that Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. Now, on that note, Thomas, can you hold your thoughts for a minute while we take another quick commercial break?
Sure.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030.
Thank you all for hanging in with me there through another commercial break. I am still here with Thomas Keister, although I'll warn you, we got about 15-20 minutes left and we got to wrap this thing up because I got to get on out of here. All right, Thomas, we've been covered a ton of issues. We've done state, federal, local, and everything in between. So, what else do you want to talk about?
Good question. I think we just need to kind of get back onto the national focus and try to kind of get our heads wrapped around, how we went from vaguely political process that people weren't satisfied with to runaway crazy train reality show. And
it is a runaway crazy train reality show. I will give you that one. And it's so weird. None of this, you couldn't script half of this stuff and sell it to a studio, but it's playing out in real life on a daily basis. I remember an interview I did a few months ago, or actually that was more than a few months ago, it was probably last year. It was around the time that there was controversy over a dirty story that Bernie Sanders had written while he was in college. And I got asked about that, and I was like, so let me get this straight. You have, out of all these train wreck candidates, you've got one guy whose solution to our problems is just print more money, and he's the front runner. He's done everything but pee on a woman R. Kelly style, but he's the best one on women's rights. Then you have Hillary Clinton, who's shadier than half the magnolia trees in Mississippi, and she's a front runner. But that's a good one.
The only piece of dirt you could get on Bernie Sanders was he wrote a dirty story in college. If this was the 1980s, the big scandal would be he took a tape back to Blockbuster without rewinding it.
You aren't kidding. Thankfully, you no longer have to rewind because we all have DVD players and most of us don't rent physical DVDs even. We get on demand, we go through Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, or whatever other streaming service you want.
And it's just the smoke and mirrors that they've allowed the process to devolve into. Because I know I'd mentioned the 5% barrier that if Gary Johnson can actually, if he
why don't you explain that a little better to people? Because I want to make sure we actually covered that because that is important.
Okay. Basically, it boils down to we are fighting to correct the most rigged game in the history of the United States. In 1980, we actually had the Libertarian candidate for president, a gentleman named Ed Clark. He actually debated with the mainstream candidates. and scared the process so badly that very same year, the Commission on Presidential Debates was formed.
Wow, I
That's
had
the
not
group.
heard about this guy debating in 1980, but then I was born in 87, so you have to pardon me. I'll have to look into it.
So they came up with this Commission on Presidential Debates that has successfully hamstrung every third party and independent candidate for the last 36 years. The only exceptions have been Malcolm Forbes, who tried to disguise himself as a Republican to sneak into the process, or Ross Perot, who flat had enough money to buy the polling to get himself into the race. The way the commission works is to make the main debate stage, you have to poll at least 15%. Outside of this year, with the increased focus on libertarianism and Gary Johnson, when was the last time you heard of a third-party candidate being mentioned in polling?
Never.
Never. Because the Commission on Presidential Debates also controls the companies that handle the polling, because they go by a formula based on, I believe it's 3 or 4 different polls. And it was really funny a couple of weeks ago, because the story came out where Monmouth University, which is one of the major polls that is used, had Gary Johnson at 11%. And that's really what is starting to make a lot of
How many
people,
times does he have to hit 15?
I think he has to hit 15%. This is the part where it gets a little sketchy for me. I believe he has to hit 15% in one of the 3 polls, or it has to be like an average or something. I'm not entirely clear on that chunk of the process. But this commission has basically it was created for the express purpose of corralling power and ensuring that we was going to be stuck with a 2-party duopoly. So now that they have finally managed to just half-ass themselves to the point where everybody is finally starting to go, maybe a third party would work. Because you have people in the mainstream themselves who are starting to talk third party. I can't remember his name. The junior senator from Nebraska even said, if you don't like Hillary or Donald Trump, you need to vote differently. And this is a member of that mainstream duopoly saying, you know what? I can't even palate these choices. If I can't palate these choices, and I'm a cog in that very machine, and I'm telling you to look elsewhere, people are starting to catch on to that.
Well, I will say that's what made me actually look at the Libertarian Party.
What got me interested in the Libertarian Party? I've been a card-carrying Libertarian for 12 years now. It is the only political party I have ever officially belonged to. I have never been registered as a Republican. I've never been registered as a Democrat. But what got me into the Libertarian Party was when I first moved to Indiana, I saw an article about Caterpillar, the heavy machinery company. They had just built a $2 billion facility in Indiana, but they wanted help from the state financially to help them train their employees. I'm like, wait. If you've got $2 billion to build a facility, you damn sure have enough money to train your own employees. If you don't, you shouldn't have spent $2 billion on your facilities. So how is it? And at that time,
I can't say anything negative about that. I mean, I'm sorry. Now, what I do know is that some of the local community colleges team up with the auto manufacturers to get the latest in automotive diagnostic equipment and such like that, so that they can get properly trained people out of them, and in return, what they get for supplying the training tools and equipment that the mechanics need to train on is they get first crack at the graduates.
Yep. And that is a great example of a public-private partnership. That is what the country used to do. We used to have business and government work together to accomplish some of these goals. Now we have a process where the companies go, well, we've got $50 billion in cash sitting back here, but they refuse to lower the corporate income tax rate, so we're going to have to do an inversion deal and move to Ireland so we pay fewer corporate income taxes. But then since all of our money is in Ireland, we can make the claim, well, we don't have any money here. We need help. We need tax subsidies. We need all this other stuff. And it's the corporate welfare, above all else, that I think is really starting to turn people's stomachs, because they see companies doing better and better and better, but getting deeper and deeper and deeper into our representative government's pockets, where they're spending our money to protect their wealth.
And I'm sorry, that is wrong. In my mind, there should be no one who is too big to jail and no company that is too big to fail. You either suck it up and do it yourself, or you go under.
And that's where this whole safe space mentality is really, it's one of the most damaging things I think that has ever happened to this country. There used to be a time and a place where if you started a business and it failed, you tried. You suck it up, you maybe try another business, or you take a straight job and maybe on down the road you squirrel back enough money and you try again. But now there's only certain people who are allowed to fail. That's everybody else.
I will say that, I'm heard on K98 Talk and other places on the internet. The person who owns the Spark Radio Network and is a managing partner and program director of K98 Talk, he works a day job. He does this in his spare time. He is trying to convert it into a business, but he realizes right now it won't pay the bills, and so therefore he is working on building up the ad revenue. So
yep.
Because
he's wanting to seek help from outside businesses by way of advertising to grow his business. He's not driving to state capitol and going, I can't get my business off the ground. Give me a bag full of money.
That is not Rick Robinson's style, not in the least. He had a security firm for 12 years before he had to shut it down and go take a paying job. And he's been working paying jobs since and pursuing things like this online radio station ever since in his spare time. And I have to admire that about him. He has never asked for a loan. He has never asked for a handout. He has said, let me figure out how I can do this for myself.
Because that is one of my, probably one of the most libertarian things about me, and it even happened well before I became a libertarian. There's always a lot of chatter every election cycle about entitlement reform. And I will be one of the first to admit, we need entitlement reform. I seem to remember, unemployment not being a crutch. It was a Band-Aid.
It's supposed to be a Band-Aid until you get up on your feet.
I turned 40 last December. In my 40 years on this planet, I have drawn 2 unemployment checks in 40 years. And a lot of people go,
well, I got to say, you've drawn more than I have, and it's not because I haven't worked.
Yeah, and a lot of people go, well, you still took the 2 unemployment checks. I'm like, yes, but what you're not realizing is the one time I took an unemployment check, that was the only check I got for 18 months. I wasn't beating down the doors of the unemployment office going, where's my money? I wasn't beating down the doors of my state legislator's office going, help me out. I was doing things myself to try and pull myself out of that situation. And I ended up starting a courier service. Did fairly well with it for 3 years, but then the price of gas hit $4 and change a gallon, and it became no longer economically feasible to keep the doors open, so I shut it down. When I shut it down, it wasn't the government's fault. It wasn't anybody's fault. It was the economic situation at the time. And it's the fact that people are willing to abdicate so much of their own responsibilities in order to get something for nothing that they don't have they have this cognitive dissonance where they don't realize that you can ask them for anything you want and they will give it to you, but they're going to want something from you later on down the road. And they're going to get it whether or not you want them to have it, because you're the one that put them into position to take it.
I have to say you're making some excellent points.
And there's just so many different things that our government could and should promote that we don't. We should be promoting public-private partnerships. The city of Detroit is an excellent example of letting a city run itself into the ground, then looking at it and go, well, you ran yourself into the ground. Too bad. No, it's not a too bad situation. It's a matter of you need to, if they can't responsibly govern, then you need to take that responsibility away from them. And the federal government did that to Detroit. It has not signaled a giant successful turnaround for the city, but it did start making people in Detroit finally start becoming aware of, we've got two choices, the screwing we're getting or the fucking we're taking, and I don't like either one of those choices.
You just made me think back to the ad with the woman, African-American woman. I believe she was in Detroit, but don't quote me. She was ongoing about how they had Obama phones and Obama this, and I saw another ad that, another interview actually this was, where someone said, I'm never going to have to pay my mortgage again because Obama's going to take care of it all for me. And I'm going, if you believe that, I have got oceanfront property in Arizona.
And that's another great example is the mortgage crisis. Everybody's like, well, the housing bubble. It's like because our government allowed financial institutions to make their own rules up as they went. You've got a couple, both of them have minimum wage jobs, but all of a sudden they're approved for a loan on a $250,000 house.
It should have been more like $25,000, but okay.
Yeah, I know sixth graders who understand if you only make $25,000 a year, you can't afford a $250,000 house. When you have kids in elementary schools who have a better understanding of living within their means than the people that we put in representative government, it's a clear-cut sign something's got to give. And I think we're finally to the point where people are understanding that we can't give anymore.
I have to say I completely agree with you. This country has, to quote Margaret Thatcher, using other people's money is great until you run out of other people's money. And then the whole house of cards comes crashing down. I'm ad-libbing that, but, the system is just, well, to use a military acronym, FUBAR. Fouled up beyond all recognition, because I don't believe in cursing on my own show, but I don't mind if other people do. I'll just mark it explicit and run with it. But yeah, fouled up beyond all recognition.
And one of my favorite expressions to cover the situation with our government is bohica.
Oh yeah, bend over, here it comes again. I had to explain that one to somebody the other day. I also had to explain snafu, which is another good one. Situation normal, all fouled up. And you can insert another F word for both of those in both of the acronyms I gave.
But I guess to kind of wrap up the interview and kind of put libertarianism in a nutshell, if if the people in this country are comfortable with a grab your ankles democracy, fantastic. That's apparently what they're used to. But if you want to quit grabbing your own ankles unless you really, really want to, vote Libertarian. If I had a nickel for every person that said, well, the government would just get out of our business, then vote Libertarian.
Well, like I said, Libertarian is probably going to end up with my vote this year because I don't want somebody under investigation, under indictment for fraud charges, or anybody under an investigation by the FBI. Neither one is liberty's safest place. I'm sorry. We have a potential despot, to quote Brad Thor, or we have Madam Super Sneak. And I'm sorry, neither one works for me. And I have watched men and women fight and die to protect our rights, to exercise our freedom of choice at the ballot box. I have watched too much of it up close and personal to be willing to throw my vote away and either A, not vote, or B, vote for somebody I can't get behind. So, all right. Before I let you go, you got a website, a Twitter address, anything you want to put out there for where people can find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Thomas Keister. It's ThomasKeister. My favorite thing to say is my name is Keister, spelled just like it sounds, just like ass. 4 years ago, I actually ran a mayoral campaign, and my website was called electmyass.com.
Oh, that's
Had
funny.
a little bit of fun with that.
That is just too funny.
You can also find me on Facebook, or you can go to thomaskeister.com.
All right, and I will post links to at least the Twitter and the website. If I get a minute to track down the Facebook page, I'll post a link to that as well in the description of this podcast. All right, well, I thank you very much for coming on. It has been a blast. You are welcome back anytime, win, lose, or draw, because I have a feeling you and I could talk situation of this nation for hours on end. We managed to burn 2 hours here today.
Did a lot of good work.
All right. All right, well, this is Jesse from Jesse's POV. I'm going to end this, since we've been talking so much about Hillary Clinton, with the parody Super Sneak. And I'm out of here. I'll let you listen to that.
You can lay down if you wanna. You can run away if you wanna. You can pretend that this is totally okay if you wanna. You can play dead if you wanna. Forget what they said if you wanna. Turn your back on the country needing you right now, but I don't wanna. I'm not ready to end the fight. I'm not ready to back down. 'Cause I've been through hell and I don't have time to go round and round and round. It's too late to turn back now. You know I wouldn't if I could. 'Cause I'm proud as hell. I can't bring myself to do what it is you think I should.
We at K98 Talk would like to thank all members of the United States Armed Forces for their service on this Armed Forces Day. Thank you. Your service means that we have the freedom to do what we do every day. Thank you and have an outstanding day.